My name is Dr. John Dominguez. I'm a clinical psychologist for Meridian Psychiatric Partners in the Chicagoland area. And the only chance that you might know who I am is if you have tuned into either or both of the first two videos in this series on general mental health and psychological wellness. This is the third installment, and today I'll be talking about social problem solving, breaking it down into concrete steps for you. If you did um, not see either one of the first two videos, I'll let you know what you missed very briefly, and you can check them out if you want to. The first of the series was on preventive mental health. I presented a model called SENSE, which stands for sleep, exercise, nutrition, self-care, and engagement, as 5 ways that we can booster our psychological wellness and do the best we can to keep ourselves as mentally healthy as we can. Check out that video if you're interested. The second one was a model for personal growth that I put out there. I called it the change pyramid. It's a personal. I keep saying professional. It's a personal development model that's got 4 stages to it: awareness, motivation, belief, and commitment as ways to promote positive change. Again, please feel free to check that out if you missed it and are interested. And let's jump into video number 3. Today's discussion is going to be about social problem solving. How do we approach a situation where we find ourselves in some interpersonal conflict? How do we make good decisions about how do I handle this? I'm going to provide a framework to think about that hopefully you can use to support student or client thinking about social problem solving, or perhaps enhance your own. This model was designed to teach middle school and upper elementary school students ways to think about how to solve problems. The way that I have tweaked and enhanced this model has made it more appropriate for older students and adults with more mature problems. The steps are still relevant. This is not, I don't want to claim that this is my model, the Dominguez model. This is a model that I've stolen different pieces from. There's a lot of social problem solving models out there, and you can see there's a ton of overlap. So again, I don't want to pretend that I was the first person that came up with this, or that this is 100% my own. I picked pieces from different things that I've read, and I put it into this one. And it's similar to other models, but there's some things that I emphasize that I think are important that I didn't see other models emphasizing, and I'll be talking about that throughout. So really quickly, the 6-step process starts with just identifying the problem. Once you've identified the problem, I want you to think about your goals. What do you want to get out of this problem? What do you want to get out of this solution? Step 3, let's think about what some positive solutions could be. Step 4, what are the likely consequences to each of these possible solutions? And then based on that analysis, pick one, take some action, and then see how it goes and evaluate the process after. So those are the 6 steps in speed round form. And now I'm going to go through each step in a little more depth. So let's start with the first one. Step 1, identifying the problem. Obviously, without a problem that's been identified, there is no social problem solving process that needs to happen. So that's the obvious piece there. Having an accurate problem assessment is the first difficult part of this. A lot of times we find ourselves frustrated with someone and we kind of jump to a conclusion about what the actual problem is. Let's make sure that we slow down enough to get an accurate assessment of what the problem is, and using all the information that we have available to us. And maybe we're not going to be 100%, but as long as we're trying to use all of our observational skills and thinking skills to identify, okay, what is the problem here? Is it that I feel attacked? Is it that this person is saying things to purposefully provoke me? Let's do our best to try to make sure we're getting an accurate assessment of the problem. We also want to make sure that we're not blowing up the size of the problem. If you're human, you've had a situation where a social problem arises, and based on your own mood at the time or the history you have with this person, you blow this problem up into something that it might not be. Like this is a dire situation where this person is really trying to ruin my life, when in fact this person might just be having their own bad day and took it out on you a little bit. That's a very different size of the problem. So make sure that we're not blowing up the problem or minimizing the problem. We're having an accurate assessment and we're taking it for what it is. And then, as with everything in life, the more regulated we are emotionally and behaviorally, that allows for more clear-mindedness, which is always a good thing to have when you're doing things like solving problems. So that's the step one of the identifying the problem. And then step two, considering your goals. This is, to me, the most important step in the process, and it's also the most overlooked. Most models, if you and you can test me on this, you can go look at social problem solving models, and they won't all include this step or something like it. And that is, once you've identified the problem, before you start thinking about how you could solve it, don't forget to ask yourself the very important question of, what are my goals? What do I want to get out of this problem solving situation? Do not fly over this one. I even put that in my little bullet point. This is like the flyover states. That I'm from California, so people used to talk about flyover states of, no one ever wants to go to the flyover states. You don't want to fly over this this step. Most people do, and it leads people into problems. We want to embrace this step, because we need to make sure that our goals are aligned with honorable values and considerations. One perfect example that I see students and teens make a lot errors in this particular step is if they feel like they've been wronged by someone else. If they find themselves in interpersonal conflict with a peer, let's say, and they feel put out by that peer somehow. Oftentimes, the students that are the child's, response, or their impulsive reaction, is to want to get revenge on that other peer. If they're going to make me feel this, well, I'm going to make them feel even worse. Like, that just seems to be almost like an instinctive, protective reaction that kids can have. Obviously, if one of your goals in an interpersonal conflict scenario is to get revenge on the other person, and you used a social problem solving model based on that goal to make a decision, your decision will probably only escalate the situation. I think that's sort of an obvious one. So we need to make sure, this is why this step is so important. We need to make sure that our goals are honorable. Okay. Yes, you might be upset at that person. You might feel like they deserve to get a taste of their own medicine. But at the end of the day, it's always an important goal to want to preserve relationships with people. Even if it's someone you don't like or don't have a relationship with, maybe you don't want to preserve that relationship, but there isn't much to preserve. But at the very least, you don't want to create conflict and tension in a relationship. That doesn't make any sense from a social problem solving perspective. That just creates drama and problems. We're trying to reduce and solve problems. So what I teach my students when I teach this model, um, is I'll give you guys a hint. I'm going to give you guys two goals that I want you to include in every social problem solving situation that you ever have. So you got two freebies all the time. Every problem you run into, I'm giving you two freebies. One is preserve relationships, and two is stay out of trouble. Those two goals should be applied to every single one of your social problem solving scenarios. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to create drama and tension. So preserving relationships is definitely an honorable goal, and staying out of trouble. Some of the kids I work with, they're not afraid of getting into trouble and blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, nobody wants to, have restrictions removed or get arrested or get grounded. So it's obviously a noble goal to also want to stay out of trouble. So those are two things that you can apply, everyone can apply to every social problem solving goal. You don't want to create problems in relationships, you want to preserve relationships, and you want to keep yourself out of trouble. Okay. Additional goals. Well, before I go on there, so if you have, if you're, like I said with revenge, if you have a negative goal in there, then the outcome of your process is going to be negative. It's going to be escalating the conflict. I know I mentioned that before. I wanted to restate it. So make sure your goals are aligned with honorable values and considerations. I've given you two that you can apply to everything, but depending on the situation, you might want to add one or two more. So for the purposes of this video, let's come up with a hypothetical scenario. So let's say that the problem that I identified in the last step was, I should have talked about it last slide, but let's say that the the problem that I'm having is my neighbor's dog is always barking really loud at night at the time that me and my family are trying to go to sleep. And it's out in the backyard and it's really, really loud and it's really hard to fall asleep. And it's been happening more nights than not. Okay. It's not the most intense social problem you're ever going to have, but for the purposes of this video, it'll do the trick. So that's my problem, is my neighbor's dog is keeping me up and my family up at night, and I don't like it, and it's not working for me. Okay, so in this scenario, in addition to preserving relationships and staying out of trouble, I might identify a third goal in this as simply, what is my major goal here? Okay, this is what I don't want you guys to overthink. My goal is, I want the barking to stop so that I can get a good night's sleep. Okay, not rocket science. Okay, and that is an honorable consideration. I deserve to have some quiet when I try to go to sleep at night, right? We all do. So for the purposes of this problem, my goals are preserve relationships, stay out of trouble, and get the barking to stop. Okay, so I'm going to keep those three. And when I work with students about this, we have a one of my colleagues created a form that kids can actually go through and write this stuff down. But I'm going to keep these three goals in my head. I know what they are. So preserve relationships, stay out of trouble, and get the dog to stop barking at night. So those are my three goals going into the next step, which is generating some solutions. So what I'm going to say about generating solutions is all of our social problem solving strategies that we can choose lie on a continuum from very passive to very aggressive. So on one end, I could do absolutely nothing at all about my barking dog situation. Or on the other end of this continuum, I could bust my neighbor's door down and grab that dog by the collar and throw it in the house so I don't have to hear it barking in the backyard, and that my neighbor can deal with the barking dog from inside the house. Okay. Those are two ways that I can attempt to solve this problem that are on polar ends of this continuum that I talk about. And when I teach this process to teenagers, again, I want to teach them what this continuum is, and I want them to choose solutions that are at different points in the continuum. I want them to choose a more passive and a more aggressive solution, and I want them to pick something more in between, a more assertive solution. Okay, and I want them, just for the sake of comparison, I want them um, to be able to do that. Now, as adults, when this model is sort of second nature to you, when you are generating different solutions, because most solutions on the very passive end or the very aggressive end are not going to be very effective. I will save you the suspense and tell you that most of our smart social problem solving decisions are kind of somewhere in the middle. I mean, not all the time. There are some times where very passive solution might be the best solution. I'm not an angry person, but for some reason when I'm driving and I'm behind the wheel, I get very aggressive, not with my vehicle, but like if somebody cuts in my lane in front of me without using their blinker, for some reason, I want to like I want to like destroy that person's soul. Okay, I don't know why I get so rageful about that, but I know that, you know, a more aggressive or even assertive attempt at solving that problem, confronting catching up to the person in my car and yelling out my window whatever I want to say to the guy, whether it's verbal abuse or hey, could you please use your blinker? Those are silly solutions in this scenario, in my opinion. Probably the smartest solution, and I could prove it to you if I went through the process with this particular scenario. But again, I'll save you the suspense. A more passive solution here might be smart. Just let it go. Let the guy go on with his non-blinker using ways and just let it go. It's not your problem. Okay. So there are definitely some solutions that for whom a passive response is wise, and there are a very small percentage of problems where a more aggressive conflict resolution approach is appropriate. If you're being physically attacked or someone in front of you that you're trying to protect is being physically attacked, a more aggressive response is going to be your best bet. So you get the point, but 95% of the time, that's not an official number, but most of the overwhelming majority of the time, your best solution is going to lie somewhere in the middle of this continuum. So as you get more mature, as kids get more mature, and as adults, if we're going to use this model, most of the solutions that we're gonna generate and compare they're all gonna be sort of in the middle, sort of more assertive, not passive, but assertive, not aggressive sort of area. And there might be some like subtle differences with each potential solution. But when I'm teaching the model to younger kids, or if you're in that role as well, for the purposes of education and edification, use three solutions that are spread out in each of the three major sections of the continuum. Okay, so for our dog barking scenario, one passive solution would begin be to do nothing. Okay, just deal with the barking dog at night. Okay, so that's one thing that I could do. A more aggressive approach that I could do is, again, I could bust the guy's door down and throw the dog in the house. A more uh, assertive, is what I call the sort of the middle range of this continuum, would be maybe the next day, or gentle knock on the door that night, and just ask to have a conversation about how we can sort of work together. Now, what that conversation looks like, we're not going to talk about much in this video. The next video that I'm going to drop around this is going to be about what those conversations that we have with people in solving conflict, what that's going to look like. But all for the purposes today, we're just using this model and understanding how this model works. So for these three solutions that I have: do nothing, bust the guy's door down and throw the dog in the house, or have a conversation with my neighbor. Those are my three solutions that I'm going to use for this. And you usually want to generate at least two, but maybe no more than four potential solutions for any specific problem that you have. Okay. And I talked about how, when we're more sophisticated in this process, we're going to have a wider range of a more narrow range of options that are more in the assertive range. We know that in most cases the overly passive or aggressive solutions aren't going to work. So we're going to be hanging out in that middle of the continuum area. All right. So once I have my three solutions, which I have, I'm going to anticipate and I'm going to think about the likely consequences for each of the three scenarios. And this is the part of the process that you make it as objective as possible. It's almost mathematical. I mean, this math isn't difficult, but there is math involved in this video. I'm sorry for people who hate math, but I promise the math is really easy. And as I said, my colleague who kind of wrote the forms to help people through this process, set this up very nicely. But what we're going to do is we're going to anticipate the consequences of our three solutions. Remember, our three solutions are: do nothing, have a conversation with the neighbor, or bust through his house and throw the dog in the house. We are going to anticipate the consequences for each, and we're going to assign a number value to them. And that number value is going to represent what we anticipate will be the outcome based on our 3 goals from step 2. So remember, this is a couple things that I'm keeping in my head, but it's not difficult to do. The 3 goals that I have, remember, are preserve relationships, stay out of trouble, and get the dog to stop barking. So what I'm going to do with each of these 3 possible solutions is I'm going to anticipate whether or not this solution will meet those goals. So in my first solution of doing nothing, okay, the first thing I'm going to ask myself is, will doing nothing preserve a relationship? And the answer to that is probably yes. Okay, it could be a maybe, because if I don't do anything, I might be more resentful of the neighbor, so that could damage the relationship. But I'll assign a value of 2. You can see here on the screen that if the answer to the question is yes, the solution will meet this goal, then assign a number of 2 to it. And in this case, I will assign a value of 2. Doing nothing will probably preserve my relationship with the neighbor. Would it get me into any kind of trouble? Would I stay out of trouble if I did nothing? Yeah, I'm not doing anything wrong. Okay. So that's a yes to that too. I'm up to 2 plus 2 is 4. So far, this is a 4-point solution. Um, will I get the dog to stop barking? That's probably a no, because I'm not doing anything differently. So it doesn't meet that goal, but 2 out of 3 isn't bad. That's a score of 4. Okay. So chalk that up. The solution of doing nothing gives us a value of 4. What about if I have a conversation with the person? Or let's jump to just for the purpose of training, let's jump to the aggressive one first. Bust in the guy's house, find the dog, throw him in, race out in the backyard, throw him in the house, tell the neighbor, you deal with the loudness. Don't throw him in the backyard, so we have to deal with it. Will that preserve relationships? No. 0. Will that get me into trouble? Potentially. I'm trespassing. Um, so at least maybe. So let's give it a 1. And will that get the dog to stop barking? I mean, maybe. I mean, if I were that neighbor and someone busted in my house, I would plant my dog right outside that bedroom window, and make the guy suffer. So, but I'll give it a maybe. But that's 2. That's 2 maybes for that scenario. So that's only 2 points. Even the aggressive one is worse than the passive one. Okay, so we're probably not going to use the aggressive one if we're using this model. Okay. Now let's look at the third, more moderate, more assertive solution of having a conversation with the neighbor. Now, will that preserve relationship? Yeah, because I'm having a conversation. I'm not making threats or going crazy. I'm just having a problem solving discussion. So I'm not going to threaten any relationship doing that just by wanting to solve the problem. Okay. Will I stay out of trouble? Yeah, I'm not doing anything wrong. Okay. And will I get the dog to stop barking? That's at least a maybe, because if you're going in with a collaborative problem solving approach, which is what a more assertive solution would be, you're going to let the person know, this is, I really need it to be a little more, I kind of deserve for it to be a little more quiet at night when I'm going to sleep. I got to get up early. That. Um, and um, without being totally aggressive and making demands. So if you go in with just a more collaborative approach, oftentimes that will lead to some sort of joint solution that everybody agrees upon. I'll just give that a maybe. It's not for sure that the person is going to say yes, I'll bring the dog in every night, so you don't have to hear it, but I'll give it a maybe. So 2 plus 2 plus 1 is 5. So as you would have guessed, the more assertive middle of the continuum response of just having a collaborative conversation is, by this process, our best option. That gave us the most points. So that's what we're going to choose. And that's the actions that we're going to take in our next step. So that's all step 5 is. That's the just do it step. You've chosen a solution based on going through the process of steps 1 through 4, which we just did. And now you're ready to, in this case, go have that conversation. Again, I'm not going to go into exactly what this conversation is going to entail. That's next video. But suffice it to say that at the very least, you're going to go in with a collaborative problem-solving approach. I mentioned that 12 times because it's that important. And emotional and behavior regulation is also extremely important when you're having this conversation. Again, staying regulated allows us to access the part of our brain that's going to lead to more sensible, logical, smart problem solving. Okay. And some action steps, like in our case, in the barking dog case, this really is um, a problem solving approach. Like this is like there's something that I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to have a conversation to see if the neighbor can work with me to get the dog to stop barking. But there are some um, social problem solving scenarios where you're not really doing any problem solving. Like you might just be radically accepting what's going on, or coping because it's not anything you can do anything about. Like think about the example of the guy who cut me off without using his blinker. I made a decision that I'm not going to do anything. So my action step is actually going to be nothing. So it's not like a problem solving action. It's going to be just accepting that some people are just bad drivers, and I just have to hope that he doesn't hurt himself or anyone else by driving without so recklessly without using a blinker. Okay, so some action steps are going to be no action at all. It's just going to be accepting and coping with the situation, and and others, like my barking dog situation, there will be an action step around problem solving, in this case, that conversation. So I have that conversation, and it goes how it goes. And the last step is just to evaluate that whole process. What was the outcome? And I trust my skills because I teach this stuff. And if you tune into video number 4, that goes into what this conversation with the neighbor should look like specifically. I trust my skills in this, where I bet I could get a good, I know this is just a hypothetical scenario, but I'm betting I could get a good outcome, that I could go to the neighbor and 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 acknowledge that it probably is easier, more convenient to him to have the dog, be outside for parts of the night, and get him to think about what impact that could have on the neighbors, and maybe compel him to sort of work with me on a solution. I'm confident that we could come up with some sort of solution that could meet both of our goals and not interfere with my and my family's sleep at night. But that's what you're going to do. You're going to reflect on what the outcome was, and then you're going to look at, did I did this process that I went through, did that did that end up being the right choice, or in retrospect, is there something else that I could have done that would have likely had a better outcome? And if that's true, where in my social problem solving process did I mess up? Did I miscalculate the anticipated consequences? Did I not think of this potential solution? And if not, why? So either way, you're gonna think about that, and you're gonna reflect, and you're gonna hopefully learn some lessons. So if the decision that you chose, if your problem solving decision that you chose didn't turn out the way you wanted to, reflecting on the process, evaluating the process, doing the troubleshooting, coming up with some things that you could do differently in a similar problem solving scenario in the future, that's what we're going to get out of this last step 6. Okay, so I know I ran through these kind of quickly, but again, I don't want to keep too much of your time. But those are the steps. Those are how they can be used in the hypothetical scenario. There there are millions of scenarios that you can use this for. So that's why I wanted to make a video and give you guys this framework. So thanks for tuning in, especially those who have been through the first 3 videos in this series. The next one that I said I was going to drop is interpersonal conflict resolution made easy. So if this content has been helpful and you're interested in the next video in the process and in the series of general psychological wellness and mental health, please tune in. Again, I'm Dr. John Dominguez from Meridian Psychiatric Partners, and I hope that you guys continue to watch. Thank you very much, and be well, everyone.